All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to your crash course for being a fifth grade sex ed teacher, since the state of the world is making it so that that might not happen. Your kid might not get sex ed in fourth, fifth, or sixth grade. That's usually when schools start offering sexuality education, unless you live in a very progressive state or in a different country where people, the school districts, the states, the countries tend to do a little better than we do when it comes to sexuality education. So anyway, hi, welcome. If you're watching the recording, sorry we missed you. Please hang out to the end. There's going to be lots going on for the whole time. But before we get rolling and get to the stuff that you want, I just want to say hello. My name is Amy Lang. My company is called Birds and Bees and Kids, and I help parents like you figure out how to have great, comprehensive, fun, sex-positive conversations with your kids about the birds and the bees. And today we're going to be looking specifically at how can you take the place of their sex ed teachers? Because of the way kids are learning right now and the C word, one of the first things to go is probably going to be their sex ed, and it usually happens in the spring. And so this is a really critical time for kids to have a lot of information, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But before we get rolling, I just want to say a couple more things about myself, set up some agreements, and then we will get rocking and rolling. So the first thing is, for those of you who don't know me, I just want to let you know how I started doing this work. I've been a sexuality educator for over 16 years, and I loved it. It was my hobby. I'd talk to anybody you can think of about just about everything related to sexuality. I had assumed I was going to be amazing at the sex talks when I had a kid. Turns out I was not. I was pretty much uncomfortable. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know when. And so I was super surprised at that. And so I jumped in and did a bunch of research and figured out how to talk to kids about sexuality, love, and relationships. And I also have a master's in adult education. And while I was getting this all sorted out, I realized that I could combine my two favorite things, talking about sex and teaching grown-ups, and I did. And so I started Birds and Bees and Kids. My son was 5 at the time, and he's 19 now, and I think he's done being completely mortified by my work. So I feel like, I've done my job. You can imagine having a sex educator for a mother. It's probably not the greatest thing. And I know some of you did have sex educators for moms. So anyway, so that is my story. I also just want to acknowledge that I realize that I am a white cisgender woman. I'm married to a man. I'm American. I'm liberal. I'm secular. I'm educated. And that all shows up in my teaching and in my worldview. And I just want to acknowledge that and to let you know that I am aware of that and where those parts of me show up. And I believe my job is to tend to that and also to teach you research and evidence-based information that's going to help you help your kids and become the go-to source for their birds and bees information. So we're going to be talking about sexuality. That can be hard on folks. So I just want to let you know that if this is uncomfortable for you, please don't hesitate to just take yourself out of the conversation. You can always come back and watch more. You can reach out to me individually. This is sometimes really challenging for folks. So because of that, we'll be breathing as I go along. As you can see, this is my PowerPoint. And I'm in kind of tight quarters here, and I'm using a script so I don't talk forever. So I might kick things. And so I just want to warn you that I'm not having an earthquake. I'm in Seattle. We're not going to have any earthquakes. We got enough shit going on these days, right? There will be swearing, most likely. And what else? I think that's it. So let's take a breath and get rolling. Oh, sorry. If you have questions, please pop them into the chat. My friend Julie is monitoring that, and we'll stop at some point in the middle for y'all to ask some questions. If you'd like to play along, people are posting what the name of their elementary school where they were in 5th grade, and then where that was in the world. And so just full disclosure, I went to Lincoln Elementary School in Ashland, Oregon. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to do. So first things first. Before, I would never I would rarely recommend having a conversation with your kid about sexuality that was really kind of formal feeling. That is not what's most effective with children. So thanks to COVID, you get a pass. So for those of you who are feeling a little bit at sea about how to kind of wing it and work those conversations in and be super casual about it, here you go. You can just make it formal, make it like you're having a class. It's a really great excuse for you to start the conversations or restart the conversations because it's school. And just tell them, you know what, this is important. There's a good chance you won't get it this year because it's going to be one of the first things that will go away if, because you're all cramped for time these days and things are cuckoo. It's too bad because sex ed is super fun. And maybe I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, this is going to help you help your kids, right? And that's what we really want. And so you can take some of what you're going to learn tonight and do it in your regular life. I wouldn't recommend it because it's kind of weird, but again, we get a pass. It's COVID. Get to be formal because we don't have a lot of options right now. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is going on with sexuality education specifically in the United States. So we're going to take a peek at that. I'm going to help you understand like what are the benefits of taking on this role of sex ed teacher for your kids, and show you that it's how to kind of do this with confidence. We're going to talk about some easy ways for you to prep for your lessons because again, you get to we're going to learn about masturbation. And side note, we are going to learn about masturbation. You get to watch a video later. We're going to talk about just some other ideas for planning your lessons, how you want to present them. And I'm going to show you my top 5 suggestions for making this happen in a way that feels good to you, which is super important to keep you confident and comfortable, and then also feels, relatively speaking, good to them. The thing about 5th graders is that they are in puberty, on the cusp of puberty, and they also generally tend to be completely grossed out by this. So we will have a little bit of a conversation about what to do with that. But they're ready for this information. 5th grade, for those of you who have worked with me in the past, you know that I believe that they should know everything by the time they start 6th grade. So this is going to get you to that everything. It's going to get you to that everything. All right, so let's talk about what's covered in sex education generally in the United States. Sorry, I gotta get my tools. So here's the first thing. It depends. It depends on where you live. It depends on what state you're in. It depends on what the school district you're in. So it just depends. So it's kind of a crapshoot, which sucks. So here's the other thing you need to know. 28 states have mandated sexuality education. 28 states. That is not all of them. And 35 states they mandate that if sex education is taught, it has to have an abstinence only component. So that's the next thing. Abstinence is a word I don't know how to spell. Abstinence only is, we hear this all the time. It is a myth. It's taught all the time. It does not help kids. The states that have abstinence only sexuality education as their main source of sexuality education, they're the states with the highest teen pregnancy rates. So it doesn't work. It's never worked. It's never going to work because everybody eventually does it. Not everybody, but pretty much everybody eventually does it. And most people have had sex by the time they are early 20s. I want to say 19, but that's not quite right. It's like 21 or 22. That's like 90% of people. So in my book, that's pretty much everybody. So, so most of the programs, a lot of the programs have an abstinence component to it, and not an abstinence in it. It's an option. It's abstinence. It's the only way. The next thing is that there is a bunch of stuff they can't talk about. Most of the time it's about abortion. They can't teach about abortion. They can't talk about abortion. Sometimes it's birth control methods. Sometimes it's LGBTQ issues. they also, one of the things that is, which is, I find this fascinating, is that most states require that kids learn about HIV and AIDS, but they can teach it without talking about sex, which boggles the mind. A district here in Seattle, they actually, a while ago, somebody sent me the video that they show the kids, which was from 1992, and it was really weird and didn't make any sense to me, and I'm a grown-ass woman. So what we're looking at is this kind of mishmash of sexuality education. So in the state of Washington, we have the best kind of sexuality education, which is comprehensive. So there's a lot of to do right now about that in Washington state, but I just want to explain to you what comprehensive means. Comprehensive in this particular circumstance means that it goes from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So that means that every year kids get a little dose of sexuality education. So kindergartners are not learning about, I don't know, intercourse, masturbation. They're learning about safe touch, consent, how to be a good friend, seeds, right? Seeds of healthy relationships. They don't get to the good stuff until kids are in 4th or 5th grade. And then they talk more about reproduction, more of the social, emotional issues around sexuality. So when we're talking about comprehensive, and by the time they're in high school, they learn everything. And the cool thing about comprehensive sexuality education is that it works. So in the countries that have really, really good sexual health outcomes for their teenagers, they have comprehensive sexual health education. So I actually went through and looked at how they parse it out. And so I thought it was really interesting. So I'm just going to talk you through some of that. And so the first thing they look at is human development. So this includes reproduction, puberty, sexual orientation, gender identity. Another section is on relationships. So this is families, friendships, dating, right? All the kinds of relationships. Personal skills, so that's communication, negotiation, decision making, right? These are all things that we absolutely need to be capable of when it's time to, become a dating person or a sexually active person or someone in a relationship. Sexual behavior, so that includes things like abstinence, right? And just sexuality throughout the lifespan, which is something I also think that we really should know more about. We tend to hang out in the teenager to post-pregnant person, like teenager to menopause. We got a lot of data about that, and the rest of it's nothing. And then sexual health in general, which is about, STIs and birth control and that sort of thing. And then the last piece is that they also focus on society and culture. So media influence, gender roles, that sort of thing. So that's what comprehensive means. And you're all grown, right? And so if you think about, for kindergarten, talking about human development, right? You can see how you can make these things very bite-sized and little for a little person, and then how they can get bigger and bigger as people get older. So comprehensive is the way to go. Cannot say enough good things about the comprehensive sexuality education. The cool thing about being a parent and having your own children is that you can do comprehensive sexual health education because you're the boss of it. So I highly recommend this, just in general, in your casual chit chat and your philosophy around talking to your kids about sex. Comprehensive is absolutely the way to go. Okay, I'm not breathing. I'm wondering if you're breathing. Let's take a breath. Here we go. Thank you. So that's kind of what's happening here. So just really kind of depends on where you are. And the bottom line is that no matter what kind of sex ed your kid might get, it's never going to be enough because school cannot do everything your kids need. So yay, you're going to capitalize on this moment in time where it's okay for you to put your sex educator hat on. And then it'll also feed what's coming along, when you can be more casual about it. But yes, school's never ever been enough. And one of the reasons sexuality education in schools is so important is because some families just can't. They don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the skills, they might not speak the right, the right language, they might not understand this stuff, and so they just can't do it. And so when we're looking at overall health in terms of our children, this is vitally important because you know sexuality is a huge part of being human and they have every right to know how all that works. Okay, let's move on. So I want to talk about, oh look, I'm changing my slide. The benefits of putting that sex educator hat on. And so here are the things that happen that are really helpful. The first thing is this. You have a different vibe. So when you put your I'm teaching you hat on, you show up differently. You might stand up a little bit straighter. You might talk differently. You might be more confident or appear more confident. You have this different vibe with your kid because it's more serious, right? Because you're taking a moment in time to do something that's very specific and you're teaching. So that's the first thing. I need to keep the lids off my markers. The next thing that happens is it's easier. It's easier on you because you don't have to wing it. You can decide, okay, today we're going to talk about this, or the next time we have our sex ed lesson, we're going to talk about that. So you don't have to be kind of on alert and think like, oh, I got to do this thing. Oh, there's an opportunity. Oh, no, I haven't done this yet, because you can just take those things like, oh, I haven't talked about masturbation yet. I need to talk about masturbation. That's what we're going to talk about next. And you can figure out what you're going to say. You can have a bunch of resources for you, and you can look at the resources and figure out like what videos to watch or books or whatever. So it's easier on you. Chunks. I basically just said that. You can chunk it down. So you can take one thing and talk about that one thing. So you can talk about abortion, for example. And of course this, kids have to learn about other stuff too, but you can talk about that. You can talk about birth control. You can talk about vasectomies. You can talk about menstrual products, or period products, as I like to say. I don't ever say feminine hygiene products because who says that? It sounds terrible. Sorry. I digress. So you can chunk it down, which again makes it easier on you. And then I don't think I spelled that right. I didn't. Sorry. I get past a certain hour and I cannot spell for shit. So there's less pressure on, not less pressure, less pressure on you. The reason there's less pressure is because of what I said before. You don't have to like scramble or think, oh crap, I missed that opportunity. You don't need to be on alert in the same way. Like I always want you to be on alert for sex talks and opportunities, but there's less pressure on you. And part of that is the planning piece. You can figure out what you're going to say before you say it. You know when you're going to say it, you're ready for it. So that actually relieves pressure. And if you're a super planner and you create your own little like curriculum thing, then you can know what's coming way ahead. You can plan like 6 lessons ahead. And I'm going to teach you one in a minute. So you'll see what I'm talking about. Trust me, you will think, dear God, I could do this professionally when I'm done with that. Okay, and here's the last thing, and I think this is the most important one, and I'm going to spell it right. Smarty pants. You're going to show up like a smarty pants. One of the things that will happen for you is that you'll feel, like I said, you're going to put your teacher hat on, you're going to have a different vibe, and you're going to feel smarter. You're going to show up like a smarty pants when it comes to this topic, to these topics, and your kids are going to notice that. And the end result of that is going to be that they're going to be way more likely to see you as their go-to person because you're demonstrating that you have this knowledge, you're talking about it, you're willing to talk about it. And that for me is honestly like one of the biggest reasons to do this way. But again, technically, I would never have suggested this in the before times. But here we are. Things change. Got to change the way we do our thing. I would much rather be in a room with all, however many, 81 of you than be in my office with, like this, alone, lonely. Okay. Let's see. So I think what I want to do is actually, let's do this. So part of having these conversations and teaching like this is you got to do some kind of personal work. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And Julie, I'm going to need you on deck here in a second. So my friend Julie is actually running the chat because I'm too far away and it's too hard on me. So it's super important to think about, like, when you were in the 5th grade or the 4th grade or the 6th grade, whenever you got that, first dose of sexuality education, I want you to think about what that was like for you. And I'll just give you like, what do you remember about it? And we're going to have you put that in the chat. Like, what was it like for you to have sex education? Like when you were in the 5th grade. So when I was in the 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary School in Ashland, Oregon, this is what I remember. I remember that the boys and girls were split up. And I don't know if we were split up just for the puberty talk, or for all of it. I'm not really clear about that, but I know at some point we were split up. And then here's the other thing I remember. They used like spawning salmon. I know, very Pacific Northwest. They used spawning salmon as a tool to teach us, I think, about reproduction. And so I have this memory of there being like a poster in the hallway we were upstairs, the big kids were upstairs. So that's what I remember. And the other thing for me is that I already knew all of it before I was in the 5th grade. I already knew everything from books because my parents were progressive that way. They didn't actually talk to me, but I could read. So that's how that happened. So I'd love to hear what comes up for you. And it would really invite you to share, like I did, like what you remember about having that early sex ed. So Julie, I'll let you read. If we have any.
Awesome. I get to talk.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So funny, Amy, because when you said that, it unlocked that memory for me. They also use the spawning salmon at my school. So crazy. So maybe it's a generational thing.
Yeah, maybe it's a 70s
so
thing.
Funny. Okay. So let's see, Nadine, so didn't get sex ed in Australia until about 13 or 14 years old. I was super relieved and interested to hear about it. Yeah. Had a great middle school teacher who was very open, the 90s version of Ask Me Anything. That is awesome. Didn't get it until middle school, and it was taught in conjunction with first aid. I never had sex ed in school. Let's see, split up boys and girls, and we each watched our respective movie. All I remember is learning about periods. That's it for Florida.
Yeah.
Let's see, all I got in 5th grade was we girls were taken out of class and we saw a really old film about our changing bodies. I remember that too. And they gave us a free pad. Yes. It's all coming back. So funny. So long ago and so funny. Catholic school, it all remained a mystery. LOL. I missed it because I went on a foreign exchange program. I was handed a book I never read, so I got nothing. She had no idea she even had a vagina.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Sorry, you have a vagina.
Oh gosh, 5th grade, boys and girls separate with parents mostly about puberty. Oh, with parents, interesting.
Yeah.
Went to 5th grade in a school district that taught it in middle school, then moved districts for 6th grade where they taught it in 5th grade. Never had sex ed in school. When I was about 12, my mother handed me a book, which I read by myself.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I have another related question. Thank you for sharing all that. So my related question is this. So it sounds like some of you got a little something, some of you got just the puberty thing, some of you got nothing. So my next question is this: what was missing? Like, what did you need to know? So harken back to your like 10-year-old self. Like, what was missing? What do you wish you had known? What did you need help with? So, I mean, I'll just give you an example. So what was missing for me is I didn't have enough details about my body developing. And so when my breast started to develop, hi, TMI, but here we go. When my breast started to develop, I could feel the tissue of my mammary gland. And so it was kind of lumpy. And so I thought I had what? Yeah, breast cancer, which I did not. And somehow I eventually figured that out. So I didn't have enough of the right kind of information about my body developing. And I really wish someone would have talked to me about that, and like vaginal discharge and all these things that a female body does. So that's one of the things, big things that I was missing. And then, you know, healthy, really, I mean, just the list goes on. So what are some of the things that you all were missing?
Do I get to unmute again and talk?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is your time, sister.
Fantastic. Let me get caught up here. So here's what some people were missing. I wish I knew it was okay to be curious about my own body.
Yeah.
Wish there was more talk and appreciation about loving partners and how beautiful sex can be. It was so clinical. Feelings, love, the connection between my body and my emotions, how to handle the changes, what it felt like to feel good between my legs. Wish someone had talked to me about my clitoris and feelings I had.
Yes, yes, the clitoris. We'll be talking about her later. Keep going.
Nothing about healthy relationships, the pleasure of sex. Missed info about the male experience.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to know where the Vans deferens was, but hearing more about consent and healthy relationships would have been helpful.
For sure.
I was scared to death about breast buds. Just talked to a friend yesterday about it, and she was too.
Aww.
Yeah. What was missing? Everything about how to treat a relationship, how to ask for consent and also give it. I didn't learn about erections or orgasm. I didn't know there was any room to talk. I thought I was supposed to be a superhero automatically. That masturbation was allowed for girls, not just boys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything about my body besides that I have a vagina. No talk about pleasure. Tampons mean what boys attributed these changes to mean.
So I hear some themes, right? So consent, healthy relationship. I heard pleasure, pleasure, pleasure over and over again. Not like having the wrong kind of information about bodies. Yay, vas deferens. There's some more important stuff, right? So I encourage you to, if you're parenting with someone or have a good friend or a journaling person, I would have conversations about this. This what was missing piece is really key to help yourself sort out like what you want your kids to know. And this will also help you prioritize when you're having these more formal lessons, what you want to talk with them about. Because the world is your oyster, right? The world is your oyster. And, you know, when it comes to comprehensive sexuality education, there's a curriculum by Advocates for Youth that I highly recommend that you use as a reference. And I'll talk a little bit more about them in just a few minutes. So thank you for sharing all of that. And it's a real common experience, right? I mean, that's one of the things about being a sexual person is that a whole lot of it has just not changed, right? Like, it's just not like our bodies are not that much different, but what we know and how we interact and all that, that's what's changed. So thank you. So I just want to also offer a couple other things to do to prepare yourself. So when your kids are getting their sex ed at school, their teachers cannot talk to them about values. They can allude to them, and they always, like, theoretically they're not supposed to, but like I said at the beginning, like, you can't help your perspective and who you are and what you believe. So one of the things it's really important for you to do is to figure out what are your values about sexuality. So I heard pleasure come up over and over again. I'm guessing that one of your values is that sex should be a pleasurable experience for both people. Like, that's a value, that's a belief. So how are you going to incorporate that into your conversations with your kids? So take some time to sort out your values. And then your values are what you want your kids to know, right? Like, I wanted Milo, I mean, he's 19, he's living with his first girlfriend. I really worked to help him understand, like, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And now when I chat with him about his girlfriend, I'll say, how's it going? And we chatted the other day and I said, how, you know, what's going on here? And how you doing? And he said, I'm good. And then we had a little conversation and he said, Mama, if this wasn't working, if it wasn't healthy for me, I wouldn't be in this relationship. And I was like, yes, I did not do that. I just did that in my head. So that's what we want. So the next thing you need to do to prepare yourself is to prepare yourself for some pushing back, because fifth graders are sometimes really interested in this and sometimes not so much. So you need to be ready for how you're going to handle it if they're like, hell no, sister, I ain't doing this. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want this formal thing. I don't want to talk about sex. That's why having the sex ed teacher sex ed time is really good because you can say, this is about school, we're going to do this. So you need to have a plan for what you're going to say when they push back. If they do push back, a couple different things. So if you keep the conversations and the lessons really short, that helps. If you use a timer, that helps. If you bribe them, that helps. I have parent educator pals who are like, bribing's terrible, Amy. And I'm like, all the tools. So bribe them if that's what it takes. They're not going to end up being like Donald Trump, right? That's just not going to happen. So use the tools, be prepared for some pushback, be kind about it, and I mean, of course you can understand that, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to just sit down at the dinner table with my mom and had her like, this is what masturbation is. Don't be like that. So be prepared for the pushback. And then the other thing is consciously commit. Like if you're going to do it, let's do it. Like get all in, let's do it, plan for it, make it happen. You'll feel better. You'll feel better and they'll feel better. They might not appreciate it in the moment, but you don't want them being you and making this list that we just did, right? Like you don't want that to be your kid, and you have an opportunity to help them have a really different experience than you did. Finally, if you need a refresher course, I love the book, It's Perfectly Normal. And so you don't need to go anywhere, but stay here with me. I will email you with the recording resources, okay? Just saying. So It's Perfectly Normal covers everything. It's sex positive, it's really fun, it's a really great read, and it's where you can get like your refresher course. Or for those of you who never learned anything, there you go. Now you can learn everything in one go. Okay, so a couple more things, and then we are going to have a lesson on masturbation. Yay. Okay, so this is the next little thing. So you do need to do some planning. And so I'm going to use the red pen now because I'm getting bored. So you need to do some planning. So in my Solution Center, which is my online library thingy, I just added a whole section that's online. It's homeschool sex ed resources. And so one of those resources is the sex ed curriculum that's produced by Advocates for Youth. It is comprehensive. It is kick-ass. I totally love it. So I highly recommend using that as a map for you to figure out what you're going to be doing with your kids. So the first thing you need to figure out is, when are you going to do this? Like, when is it going to be sex ed class time? So how are you going to fit this into your life and into your days, into your weeks? I highly recommend that you do it on Wednesdays because Wednesday is hump day and it's funny. So when are you going to do it? The next thing, yeah, sorry, I put these out of order. I'm like, where? What the hell do I mean? At the dinner table? No. Where will you start? Where are you going to start? So you know what your kid knows or doesn't know. So do you need to begin at the beginning? Do you need to hop in with these hot issues like, oh my God, we haven't talked about pleasure. I'm going to do a lesson on pleasure. Do you need to review? So where are you going to start the conversation? Where are you going to start the lessons? And then here's the next thing. What are you going to do for your lesson plan? Are you just going to use the Advocates for Youth curriculum? Are you going to wing it? Are you going to, what are you going to use to plan what you're going to talk about? Are you going to just do a hybrid thing, use some of both? So you need to figure that out. And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I get that. But the thing you need to remember about doing something new is that when you plan it and think about it and get your ducks in a row, when you actually implement it and start doing it, it's a lot easier. So remember, I'm going to give you a little lesson in just a sec, and you'll see what happens when you put all those pieces together. And then the last thing is this. What are you going to teach? What are you going to teach? What's on your list? So this is sort of related to where you, where you're going to start, like where you're going to begin the conversations or where you're going to begin the lessons, but what are you actually going to teach? What are you going to focus on? And so doing these planning things, these 3 little steps, a couple of them are pretty easy. Like when you can work that into your life, like the 3rd Wednesday of the month, it's hump day. We're doing our little sex ed lesson. Where are you going to start? We just need to know where your kids already are, right? So if you haven't even started the conversations at all, then you're going to look, that's going to look different, right? Than if you're solidly into it and you've got a kid that's heading into middle school. So yeah, so that's the planning piece. Okay, now for the fun part. Everybody take a breath. Here we go. All right, so I want to give you a little lesson on masturbation, and we're going to watch a video as part of that. So this is how I would teach a 10-year-old about masturbation. So if Milo were 10, I would basically, hey, it's Wednesday, it's hump day. Here we go, babe. And I want you to note a couple things. First of all, this is assuming this kid has, like Milo, has all this information, like knows what sex is, knows a bit about what that sex should feel good, and has a good solid base. The other thing is that I'm going to use third person lingo, okay? I'm going to be speaking in the third person. This does a couple things. It sets up a barrier between you and your kid, so it's less personal. So it's like, so if you say, so when you touch your penis, they're not going to lean into you so much as if you say, so when people touch their penises, it's also easier on you, right? Okay, so here's what I would say. So this is the first thing I would do, is I would say, hey, it's time for you to learn about masturbation. Have you ever heard that word before? See what they say. And they'll say yes, or they'll say no. So we're going to pretend they said yes, because maybe they have heard the word before. Great. So before we talk about what it is specifically, why don't you spell it? Let's figure out how to spell it. And then masturbation is a word that I personally cannot spell correctly for whatever reason. There are a few of those. So how do you spell it? So you figure out how to spell it. And then you can say, okay, so this is what masturbation is. So masturbation is the word for when someone touches their penis or their clitoris just for pleasure. It's something that pretty much everybody does. It's a totally normal and healthy thing for people to do. It's a great way to learn about what feels good to your body in a sexual way. It's not something you ever have to do, because some people don't. But I believe, so here comes the value, right? I believe it is really important for people to understand what feels good to their bodies, so that someday when they're being sexual with someone else, they have a better time. Things feel better to them. They can help their partner understand what feels good to them. I have to check my notes. And the other thing is that when kids masturbate, when kids do this, it's something they do when they're alone. And later in life, when a person is ready to start dating or having more sexual relationships, this is something that people sometimes do together. But kids do this when they're by themselves. Kids do this when they're by themselves. And yeah, that's basically it. If you're feeling bold, you could also talk about orgasms, which means you're going to have to define that as well. So you could also say when people masturbate, they usually have an orgasm oftentimes. And an orgasm feels like a kind of a sneeze in your body. And when a person with a penis has an orgasm, some semen usually comes out of his penis. And when a person with a clitoris has an orgasm, sometimes some stuff will squirt, but usually not. So it feels really good to their bodies. And that's the kind of the main reason people have sex a lot of the time. So mind you, I've said this like 8 million times in my life, and I'm scripted, which is not cheating. I mean, I'm scripted in my head, but I had to check because whatever, it's 8 o'clock at night. So that's how I would talk it. That's how I would talk it. And then there's a great organization called Amaze, and they have wonderful cartoon videos for kids on this very topic. Hang on 1 minute. I got to share my screen. You don't want to see this. We'll move around here. Okay. So we're going to learn about masturbation from my friends at Amaze. Here we go.
Oh, you are so good looking. Those lips, those eyes. Oh, I'm so glad we're finally alone. Jane, dinner! Coming! I'll be right back. During puberty, your body starts to produce more sex hormones. One of the results is more interest and curiosity about sexuality. Sometimes young people will experience sexual pleasure and relieve stress and sexual tension by touching their genitals. That's called masturbation. It's very common for boys and girls. It's normal if you do it, and it's normal if you don't, and should always be done in private. Despite what you may have heard, masturbation cannot hurt your body physically. You won't run out of sperm. You won't make your penis break off. You won't grow hair on your palms. You won't go crazy. You won't go blind. Girls, you won't get pregnant or change your menstrual cycle. Guys, you won't impact your ability to get or keep an erection. If a person finds that they're masturbating so frequently that it is impacting their normal daily routine, they should talk with a trusted adult. But generally, masturbation, even a few times a day, does not present a problem and is a physically safe way to express sexual feelings. Soon we'll be alone, my love. Okay, guys, till next time, and don't forget to come and visit me at amaze.org. Bye-bye.
Okay, sorry, that's awful. Stop. So clearly that is not for grown-ups with that terrible sound. So that's the Amaze video about masturbation. So a couple things. First of all, just showing them the video is a cop-out. You need to have the conversation beforehand. And then after you watch the video, and you can just let them watch it, watch them before you're by yourself. You can say, hey, why don't you watch this and then step away, or watch it together, just trust your gut and your kid's reaction. So that after they've watched the video, just talk about, like, say, hey, okay, what'd you think of that? Like, what was weird? And they might say the scene at the birthday table with the kid missing, right? I thought that was weird. What was funny? The scene at the birthday table with the kid missing, right? So talk about what was weird, what was funny. Ask questions like, well, what did you think about anything? Those rumors, right? That you'll go blind, or the period thing, or you can share some rumors you heard when you were a kid. And then always say, what questions do you have? And sometimes they're gonna ask, and if they ask you if you masturbate, which is there's a chance of that, then you need to say, yeah, it's, that's part of being, you don't need to say yes, you can just say, yeah, it's part of being a human. And so let's go figure out what's for dinner. That's called a redirect. So if you're comfortable, you can say, yeah, I do. Of course, I'm human. It's natural. Or you can say, people do it, and change the subject. Because at the end of the day, nobody really wants to know about their parents masturbating. No, right? Okay, can we all agree on that? It's one of my values. Maybe it's one of yours. Okay, so that was a lesson. I think the video was 2 minutes. Let me see, I looked at the clock. I think that took me 4 minutes maybe, with the talkie and the video-y. So it's really quick, which is important because attention span is not long. And your attention span is probably not going to be very long either. But be ready to commit like 10 minutes or so to these conversations, because that's how they're going to learn better, you're going to feel better, you're going to do better, and they're going to trust you more as you're having these conversations and teaching them like a teacher. Alrighty, let's do my top 5 suggestions. Look, I have a pre-done slide. So these are my top 5 suggestions. So I already talked about this a little bit, but you need to schedule the time. So figure out when you're going to do it and tell them, like, you're not going to like spring, hey, let's talk about masturbation on your kids. You're going to say, hey, we're going to start doing sex ed. We're going to do it on, again, I think Wednesdays is funny. We're going to do it on Wednesdays. This is the time. You could even say to them, like, what do you want to learn about? And they'll say whatever they say, and you can put that on the list, right? But meanwhile, you're running the show, right? You know what needs to happen. You know what you want to talk about. Short. Keep it short, 10 minutes max, probably. As you get better at it, you'll probably go a little bit longer. And don't take your cues from your kid, like get what you need to get into them. And then if they're still asking questions and still engaged, stay there, hang in there with them. But if you start to feel yourself getting overwhelmed or flooded, just say, you know what, I'm good. I need to think about that. We'll get back to you, and just stop the conversation, because you'll start blabbling and get weird, and you don't want them to think you're any weirder than you already are. Start with an anatomy review. I know vas deferens is boring, but it's important for people to know the parts, the female parts and the male parts. You need to talk about folks being intersex, like you need to talk about all the anatomy things. And earlier on, somebody said in the chat something about the clitoris. Please be sure you include the clitoris in your conversation when you're doing anatomy. She is very underlooked and under-researched. She's spectacular. Her only job is pleasure. That's it, nothing else. That's her only job. So make sure you include the clitoris in your conversations about anatomy. The other reason to talk about anatomy too is that it kind of pulls you out of all the kind of emotional stuff. So it's a good entry point. teach it. Teach it like a teacher. Put your teacher hat on, make your lesson plan, figure out what you're going to say. You need to practice, like put your teacher hat on and teach it. So commit to that role, embrace that role. Again, remember at the top, we talked about how it's easier, how you have that different vibe. It makes it basically easier on you, frankly, because it is easier on them. And then the last thing is learn. So this is for you. You need to learn more about sexuality, about how to talk to kids about sex, about you know, what you need to be doing, and just like some more like general basic information about sexuality. It's Perfectly Normal is a great place to start. And but there's a lot of other issues related. So you need to kind of get your, like, learn a little bit more. And the fun thing about sexuality is that it's fun. It's super interesting and it's fun. And it's, most of us don't know very much about it. So you're going to be maybe learning alongside with your kids. Alrighty, what else is happening? Let me see, how's our time? Oh, we're doing good, yay. I'm so glad we're gonna have a good chunk of time for questions. And I hope you're popping them into the chat, because that's where we're gonna get to them in just a minute. Let me see, what is happening to me? I got stuck together. Okay. So let's do this. Do you remember at the top when I mentioned that I was going to talk to you about some other resources I have for doing this thing called being your fifth grader's sex ed teacher? Is it okay if I talk to you a little bit about that? Cool, thanks. So if you are thinking, I am unprepared for this, I'm in trouble, if you're feeling overwhelmed, I am happy to report that I just added a full section of homeschool sex ed resources to my Solution Center. And I've done all the work, so you don't have to go out and like try to figure out like what Amaze videos are appropriate, age appropriate, or what you should look at or do or talk about, because it's all in one space. It'll be easy for you to figure out what to do and when, because it'll all be at your fingertips. So I just want to show you what's in it. Nothing. I hate when that happens. So I mentioned this, it includes all these different things. The first thing is this curriculum by Advocates for Youth. I included the link there. This is definitely the map you can use to figure out what your kids should know, just in terms of traditional sex education, traditional comprehensive sex education by age group. I curated books and videos, so they're by specific age groups. There's birth to 4, 5, I can't remember the numbers, 5 to 8, 9 to 11, I'm getting those wrong. 5, sorry, it's birth to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 13, and then 14 and over. So everything's already curated for you. Book suggestions, video suggestions, there are handouts and things for you. So you can just go there and get the stuff you need to work with your kid at whatever age they are. I put together some fun and quirky sex ed projects. For example, I highly recommend using a banana for a condom demonstration, and then making banana bread out of the banana, because what else would you do with it after it's been wearing a condom? I also pulled together, there are some really great online puberty courses that you can take with your kids. So those are there. I also included a screen time agreement that my friend Joe Langford from Be Heroes created. There are videos for you on online safety, pornography, gender, puberty prep for parents. So everything is there so that you can just go and get her done and not have to think and not have to like figure out like what do you need to do and when, because I did it for you. So there's other stuff in the Solution Center that's not really related to the homeschool sex ed, but I just want to tell you about a handful of things that will be helpful to you. The Solution Center is like a library. And so a couple of the things that I think are going to be really helpful when it comes to the sex ed teacher piece is my magic sex talks formula. So you heard me use a little bit of it when I was doing the masturbation talk. This helps you be really succinct and clear, and it's expansive. So you can make it really tiny or you can make it big. And it gives you just basically a roadmap to having a sex talk with your kid. I also have a video that is what by when in detail. So the curriculum will tell you what they should be teach, they recommend you teach or they learn by grade. This is by age by age, and it's very detailed. There's a handout that covers all of that as well. This will help inform how you're handling these conversations with your kids and your lessons with your kids, because you'll know what you're missing, right? Let's see, what else? I think that's pretty much it. So my goal there is for you to become more confident and comfortable quickly, to take away that feeling of embarrassment or awkwardness, because you're going to be full of this information that's going to help you feel like good about what you're doing and how you're teaching this. And the other thing too that I think is helpful is that you won't have to guess at what's age appropriate. I think that's one of the biggest questions parents have when it comes to just the sexuality conversations in general. Let's see. So I do want to tell you a little tale. So a client of mine, a woman who had, interestingly, 10 and 7-year-old boys, she told me that one afternoon her kids came home from school, boys ran upstairs, and like in minutes, her 10-year-old came back downstairs, and she said, I'm doing the dishes or something. And he comes up and he says, "Hey, Mom, I've got a question." And she says, "Oh, yeah, what?" And he says, "What's a BJ?" And she said, I was like, "Dear God, no, don't ask me that." She said, "That was just me on the outside." She said, "I was very calm." And I said, "Oh, great question. Why do you ask? Where'd you hear about that?" And he said, "Well, guys on the playground today were talking about BJs. What's a BJ? I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that before. What is it? Is it a sex thing?" And she said, I took a deep breath. I remembered all the things you said about staying super calm. And I just said, this is what it is. And she explained what a BJ is. And then he said, "Gross, thanks, bye." And she told me that if it hadn't been for the information she had from me, the resources from me, she would not have been able to handle that conversation. And that's the goal. That's the goal. She really showed up as her kid's go-to person for his birds and bees information. And that's what I'm sure, you need. Your kids need you. They need you for a whole lot of things, and they really need you for this. And they really need you now, because they're not going to get those pieces from school. And frankly, the pieces they are going to get from their peers, you don't want them to have it because things have changed. Anyway, okay. So that is that. So if you, Julie, thank you. There's a link, you can go check it out. And if you want to go look at it and poke around while we finish up the questions and stuff, I just want to talk to you about the price really quickly. Here, I'm going to use that sheet that was weirdly blank. So where are my pens? Okay, so in the before times, it was $15 a month, which is equal to $180 a year. That was before. Now, in the now times, I've changed it, and it's a one-time payment of $69. And if you use the code BIRDS, you get 15% off, which makes it like $59. So Julie will pop that in the chat, and go ahead and take a look. You can poke around while we're talking. And is there anything else I wanted to say about that? That's it. So that's the price. It's a one-time payment of $59 if you use that code. And
maybe the code was BIRDS. The code BIRDS?
Code is BIRDS, like birds and bees.
Code is BIRDS.
Not
okay,
bees.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. It's Burks, because I'm a middle school boy. Just kidding. Everybody finds burping entertaining. No, that's farts. Sorry. Thank you. So what questions do you have about what's in the Resource Center? If there's anything?
There's a question here from Erica. What do you think of our Whole Lives curriculum?
Oh, that's such a great question. You actually need to do something because of people who are watching this recorded. So I'm just going to write the website up here really quick, and then I'll answer your question. Sorry. So if anybody else has questions like that, throw them in there. Can we see this? Yeah, we can. It's birdsandbeescourse.com. Okay. Thank you. I love Our Whole Lives. So Our Whole Lives is a great sexuality education program that's put out by the United Church of Christ and the Unitarians. It is comprehensive. It is sex positive. It goes from like they started at about 4 all the way through lifelong. It's the whole lifespan. It's really, really, really great. I don't know if you can get your hands on the curriculum. I'm not sure that they make it public like that. I know the Advocates for Youth, which is very similar, does. So yeah, 2 thumbs up for Our Whole Lives. you can get, I think they're doing classes online. They're just starting to, so it's terrific. Can't say enough good things. So if you can get yourselves to an OWL program or get your kids in there, totally worth it. And the UUs and the UCC church are super liberal and open, and there's not going to be any recruiting or anything like that going on.
So this question came up several times in the chat for people that have multiple children, multiple ages. Ugh, sorry. Nobody wants to FaceTime with Brian Fry.
No, that's not happening.
So anyway, oh my gosh.
Okay. Free help, people, free help. That's what this looks like.
Timing, excellent timing.
Yeah. Okay. Is it desperate?
I'm just going to mute myself here. Did you get that question?
No, I don't know what it was. What?
Let me just tell my husband that I can't talk right now. I'm running a webinar.
If anybody wants to unmute and ask, go ahead. Because you can see we've become Looney Tunes here.
It was about having children of different ages.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So with kids of different ages, if the age difference is like maybe 2 years, you can just go at it at the same time. If you have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, they're fine to have the same information. If you have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, some of the same information is okay. The book, it's so amazing, is you can just teach anything out of that to both kids, like pretty much kids of any age. But as kids get older, they're not going to want to have their sibs around while we're having these conversations. So you know your family, you know your kids. No one dies from having like too much information about sexuality from their parent. And I'm talking about this kind of sexuality. So like sexuality education, like this, not, I know people grew up in families where there's all kinds of crazy ass shit going on with sex, not that kind of thing, but just like this kind of quality conversation, that sort of thing. So, so don't worry too much about it, and take your cues from your kids. Because if your 10-year-old's like, what are you doing? I'm not having this while these people are here, then you're gonna need to find another time. Oftentimes, interestingly, the younger kids are way more interested than the older kids. So you can use the younger kids to get to the older kids. So you're like, hey, we're gonna learn about masturbation, 8-year-old. Because the 10-year-old needs to know. So yeah, thanks for that. What else you got? Julie, are you talking to your husband? Is she gone?
He's moved on to talking to the children. So we are good. I think that covers it. I was just going to post in the chat for people to put your questions there. That question that was just answered, that was there multiple times. So if I've missed anybody, feel free to pop it on in there and I will grab it. I have a question. Okay, Heather has a question.
You can just ask.
Yeah, go ahead. Unmute yourself, please.
Oh, thanks. Actually, I'm not Heather. I'm Billy. It's the names are confusing. Sorry about that.
Just a little.
Yeah. Anyway, so my question is basically, I've got 2 girls, ages 7 and 10, and we live in different households. We're a 2-household family. Mm-hmm. And I'm very interested in being able to have these conversations with my kids, of course. But there's, of course, a difference as well, because at this point, my oldest daughter did reflect her preference of having these conversations with her mom. Mm-hmm. And my thought was, well, if you want to have relationships with boys, I'm a boy and I've got perspective on that, so I mean, I'm your go-to for that information. I just want to know, do you have any resources specifically for dads talking to daughters about sexuality?
And lucky her. And just so you know, this is like totally like typical for the girls to just want to talk to their moms about this stuff. And it's usually more about their periods and their bodies. Like that's where their kind of focuses, especially at her age, because the whole shebang is changing and things are really changing, and you just can't really relate to getting boobs, I'm guessing, or bleeding once a month. Oh joy. So what I would do, and what I highly recommend for dads, is a couple things. So first of all, sometimes when girls start to develop, their dads kind of take a step back because they're uncomfortable about their changing bodies and the change from a girl's body into a woman's body. So I strongly encourage you to hang in there with her. On the inside, she's still your little girl. She still needs you. So try really hard not to change how you interact with her, not to pull back. It's kind of a natural inclination, but to be there for her. So that's the first really important thing you can do for her. It sounds like you said to her, I'm your go-to, right? Like I got the experience here. I can help you out with this boy stuff, assuming she's into boys, or it doesn't even matter. Like everybody needs to know about the other gender. So I think it's great that you said that. So where you can come into the conversation with her is to talk about the guy experience, like talk about what it was like for you when you were growing up. Talk about like when you were her age and what was going on and what you missed and what you wished you had known, and find these kind of sideways ways into the conversation. She's not going to know what you're doing, right? Like sometimes I think we think our kids are going to be like, oh, I know what you're doing. Like I would know if my spouse was doing that, but Milo didn't know what I was up to, right? So don't worry like you're going to get caught out. And if you do, you can just say, I just need you to have this information. I didn't know you were like not into talking to me about it. So maintaining that close relationship, being really clear that you're there for her. Because you're in a 2-household house, you need to be straight up and say, sister friend, I know this is coming up for you. So I'm all set. Here's your gear. You don't need to be upset or worried or feel weird to tell me if this is going on. I'm happy to help you. You can write me notes, like find ways to let her know that you're really there for her. And then the last thing is, this goes for all of us, frankly, like mind how you talk about women, mind how you talk about relationships, mind how you interact with girls in particular. So one thing, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go off on a feminist side rant. Thanks. Thank you. Which really don't focus on how she looks is my bottom line. Don't say to her, I love your hair. I love your clothes. I love your dress. Say, what are you reading? What's your favorite book? What are you doing today? Man, you are getting so strong. Like talk about that stuff. Don't talk about how she looks. She needs to hear that from you for sure now and again, but really make sure that you're talking about her as a whole person. So yeah, thanks for asking that. Yeah, hang in there with her, get books and stuff, talk anyway. No one's going to die. She'll thank you later. She's lucky to have you.
All right. We have a few more questions. I'm going to skip one just for a moment because I feel like this ties into what we were just talking about. So, okay. Christina, we're going to come right back to your question. So how do you broach the subject of porn? I'm sensitive, trying not to be judgmental of professions that I would not want my children to choose, including strippers.
Yeah. Of course we have to talk about this. So the first thing you need to know about porn is that, and kids, is that making sure they are really well sex educated actually protects them when they see it. It gives them a context for what it is, and then they understand also that it's just not for kids, it's for later in life. So sex education is super important when it comes to porn exposure. Your kids are going to see porn. Every child will see porn. No one escapes childhood without seeing porn. They're going to see it. Guess what? They're going to see it. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I not clear? They're going to see it. Sorry, this is one of my hot button issues. You need to tell them what it is, and you need to talk openly about it and explain that it's videos of people having sex and doing sexual things. It's not okay or safe for kids. It can really mess up your head and your heart and your body when it comes to sexual stuff. You can talk about the industry a little bit. There is a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures that does a pretty good job of helping kids understand what porn is and what to do if they see it. And we need to be careful when we talk about sex work, and that's they're sex workers, and how you talk about them, because everybody deserves respect. So you can talk about, how sex work is, you're not comfortable with it, and talk about why, and chances are really slim that your kids are going to grow up to be sex workers, but they need to understand what that is and how it can impact them just as a human being, especially as a young human being. So it's a big topic. And my colleague Jill Langford and I are overdue. We have a talk that we do called Poison Porn, Your Kids and Porn, and we're overdue to do one. So I'll let you know. You'll be on my mailing list if you aren't already, and we'll let you know when that's happening. So thank you for asking. It's a tough one. Everybody breathe. I just hit my mic, sorry. Okay.
All right, next question. How comprehensive do you feel that the Great Conversations classes are at Children's Hospital?
Yeah, so the Children's Hospital in Seattle and some in California offer a puberty course for parents and kids to take together. It's called Great Conversations. I definitely recommend them. You go with your kid and you learn about, female puberty, and you go with your kid and learn about male puberty. So they're good, they're comprehensive, they're really fun. I love the instructors, I know them. So they're a great teaching tool, but they are not where you should start. Your kids should already know what's going to be taught there, and just think of it as another channel, like another way of learning. They're great. They're not for every kid. Some kids just couldn't handle it. Milo would have killed me. It just wasn't going to happen, didn't need to happen. So use it as another tool. And that's part of the, in the resource center there's another option for that as well. A woman named Melissa Carnegie also teaches sex positive puberty classes. So yeah, they're good, they're fun, but that should not be where they learn about sex. They should already know before they go.
All right, so my question is about how often we should formalize the conversation when it's not coming up organically. Every year, ? We have had the talk at least a couple of times over the years, but we know that things change over time. They're now 10 and 13. Do you have an example of how to evolve the conversation and how often?
Great question. So I'm glad you've already kicked the door open. So with a 13-year-old, you're in great luck. This is what you do. You're going to say, hey, pause. Between Julie's husband and my mic, it's crazy town. Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Okay, good, sorry. All right, sorry about that. It's crazy. Okay, sorry. So with the 13-year-old, you just need to say, hey, you know what? We kind of blew it here. We should have been talking to you about this more and more frequently. So here we go. We're going to start having these conversations. Get them books. And then with a 13-year-old, if they have been able to access the internet without any kind of monitoring or anything like that, or their friends have, they will have learned a ton of stuff about sex. Chances are super high. Sorry. So you need to apologize. Get them a book and tell them we're going to start talking about it. And then you need to talk about it frequently. So if you heighten, like you're going to have heightened awareness now. So you'll see things in your day-to-day life that you can talk about sexuality. So it could be something, it could be talking about sex workers. It could be something like you see an ad for, I don't know, Viagra, so there's lots of opportunities in day-to-day life to have these little quick conversations. Same with the younger kid, not necessarily on the full spectrum of topics. And then the other thing too is that you can just say, hey, we're going to start doing this. And like I said, you have permission to put your teacher hat on and say, we're going to talk about masturbation, and give me 10 minutes, and then you explain what it is. You watch the video, you have a little chit chat about it, and then you're done. Normally I wouldn't say that was okay. Now I get to say that's okay. And you might get some pushback. They're going to tell you they already know it all, and they don't. Because if you don't know it all, there's no way in hell they know it all. So just do it. Like, no one's going to die. And you're going to say, I'm just uncomfortable. I don't know how to do this, but here we go. Like, you need to know, and you need to know from me. It takes practice. It takes practice. And that's why, again, I'm like kind of delighted to be able to tell you, like, hey, use a curriculum, make a plan, sit them down, do it on hump day. I never would have said that before. So go for it. Pick one thing that feels easy. One thing that feels easy. And the other thing is this: don't say, hey, we blew it, we need to talk about this more, and then dive in. Just tell them it's coming. We're going to start talking about this more. Here's this book. It's Perfectly Normal. And the other kiddo, It's So Amazing is the book that I recommend. So here are the books, here you go, and then start talking. If you need to put a calendar reminder, put it on your reminder. You should be talking about once a week at the very least about something related to sexuality. Like, remember that whole list of comprehensive sexuality. There's a lot of places to pick and choose with topics that are related. So yeah, thanks for asking. I'm just gonna little fire under your butt. Get on it.
There we go. Okay, I'm off mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I just had a weird thing happen. All right, a lot of grandparents and older people have always said to our kids, do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? How do you explain to the grandparents that this is not a useful question and makes kids think they should have one and are less if they don't?
Yeah, That is a hard one. I just have to noodle on that for a minute. So I think that pushing that emphasis on, are you in a, like, do you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, is they're trying to connect, right, with your child. So a couple things you can do is you can just say, hey, you know, they're just not into that right now. How about you ask them about, and then feed them. Ask them about their book they just read. Ask them to show you a funny video. Ask them like how the dog is, like give them some things to talk about, because really what's happening there is they're trying to connect. And so that's sometimes the only way folks know how to connect. So that's one thing I would do. The other thing too is that I would just say to your kids, you know, I know your grandparents keep asking you about this, and I know you're just like, what the hell? But, you know, just say, you know, they're trying to connect with you. And so just say, you know, yep, nope, not yet. And then help them pick and, you know, change the topic. But I agree with you, like this emphasis on, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend, is really kind of unfair, right? And I particularly hate it when little kids who are crushing and adults say, oh, is he your boyfriend? Is he your girlfriend? Like, I hate that, because that's just, it's just weird and sexualizing and all that. So I don't know if that was helpful. If you want to unmute yourself and ask more, I'm happy to help. But yeah, I agree with you. But if they're just trying to connect, so help them find another way to connect that isn't so annoying.
All right. At what age is the appropriate time to tee off that conversation about the porn?
The porn. I would say if they're on the internet, so what, we're talking 3? I would say 3, 4, 5. If your child, sorry, I'm going to yell. I'm not yelling. You need monitoring, right? So what I would say to kids that are 5 that are online is that the rule, you might see something when you're online, you might see videos of naked people doing stuff that's not okay or safe for kids to see. You need to stop looking and tell me, you won't be in trouble. So that's a 5. At 6, at 7, at 8, at 9, you're going to get more detailed about what that is. You're going to use the word porn with them when they are 8-ish. You can use it sooner, but it's kind of hard to have a 5-year-old who says to grandma, hey, I just saw some porn Thursday, right? You got to be a little bit careful about that because they're not very good screeners, but you just need to make it really clear that there's yucky stuff on the internet. The rule is, and then later on, by the time they're like, once they really know what sex is and that people have sex for pleasure, like when that's really clear to them, then you can say, people like to look at this, not for kids, can mess you up. And don't be afraid to talk about it. They're going to see it whether you want them to or not. Most of the time it's accidental. So that's why you need to have monitoring and parental controls, because that helps that not happen. Yeah, the porn. Ugh.
That was the last question in the chat.
Okay, that's it. All right, cool.
Oh, wait, whoa. I say that, and then they come pouring in. Okay. Let's see. All right. If I've already had a lot of the talks with my 12 and 13-year-old daughters, like puberty, period, sex, orgasms, masturbation, birth, vasectomies, etc., then what should I focus on with my 6th grader who missed 5th grade sex ed in the spring due to COVID?
Wait. I'm going to look at that. That was a lot of things.
Yeah.
Where'd it go? Oh, where'd it go? Oh, there we are. Oh, God. So I think you kind of need to back up the truck. I would look at that curriculum and see what they missed and use that as a guide. You're really way ahead of everything. I don't know, like if they know about all that stuff, I think I would focus on healthy relationships. I would focus on porn exposure. I would talk about consent. There's a great new book called Consent for Kids. I would focus on that stuff, like dating, relationship, because it sounds like you got the like nuts and boltsy stuff down. If you haven't talked to them about sexually transmitted infections, more information about puberty, like you can share my story about my breast cancer at 13. That I would focus on that stuff. It sounds like you're doing a terrific job. So I think healthy relationships. So it's perfectly normal, has a really good sections about that stuff. Also, I wrote a book called Dating Smarts that also might be helpful. It's for teenagers about how to be a smart dater. And so there's stuff there too that you can use. It's for teenagers, so you can just use it as conversation prompts. So they are super lucky to have you. 2 thumbs up, Emily. All right. Okay, Eleanor Burke, I see your pod. Let's make this be the last one. Did somebody send me something secretly? Yeah, goodbye, Christine. Thanks for joining. Okay, we're now in a small pod with 2 other single parent families, and my son, 11, is the youngest. Ages 13 and 15 are the other age. I'm the sex educator of the parents, and so want to help talk to the boys and the parents who have more loose boundaries on screens. How can I have this? Oy, the screen thing is so hard. So I think that you just need to say, like, my kid's young and your kids have more access to the internet. So can we have a conversation with them about, you know, what could mess him up and what they need to be doing when he's with them, and maybe during the time they're together that everything's more restricted. If you're using Circle or Bark, which are monitoring devicey thingies, you can really restrict down what kids can access when they're in your own home. I think the thing to do with the parents is just to ask them too, like, well, how would you feel if, you know, another kid exposed your kids to, an older kid, an 18-year-old exposed your kid to something really awful on the internet and you didn't have any control over that. So maybe like have that kind of conversation. If they don't know about the porn exposure thing, that how incredibly likely it is, I mean, how that's going to happen, that might be another thing to talk about. But I would really just make it clear, like, look, we need to have monitoring. We all need to be using monitoring. It needs to be restricted to the 11-year-old level. When the boys are on their own, the big boys, they can do whatever the hell they want. They're not under your direct, you know, they're not under your, you can't do anything about the other kids. Does that make sense? That's a tough one. It's happening all the time, right? It's happening all the time. But yeah, and just be clear, right? Just be clear, like, hey, this is not safe for my kid. How about we do this? Boom, see what they do. And if they can't make it, if they can't do it, then maybe you need to change pods. Oh, sorry, that sucks. Can't imagine. Okay, cool. Oh, conversation. Yeah, got it, Eleanor. Okay. All right. So I think we should wrap her up. And so I just want to say thank you, everybody, for showing up today. Check out the birdsandbeescourse.com for more help with all of the sex talking. Don't forget to use the birds like birds and bees code for 15% off. And if you need me, another service I offer is I do quickie consultations. They're 30 minutes, $90, and we just deep dive into whatever's got you in trouble. And I provide resources, and we just have a fast conversation that apparently is very helpful from what I'm hearing. So lots of ways to work with me. Thank you so much. Good luck with your kids. This is not rocket science, people. It is not rocket science. And they can be really fun conversations. They're important. I know you want it to be your kids' go-to source for this. So thank you so much. And thank you, Julie, Miss Julie Fry, for being my co-star. Yay, are you laughing?
I have a hard time being really quick on the trigger. And